My name is Mark Salinas. I use pronouns he and him, and I'm coming by way of California, East Bay, Ohlone territory. And I want to say good afternoon. Happy Friday to you all. And we do have some folks on other continents. And so you can put some times in there if you want to say where you're coming from, because we have folks in the house from maybe New Zealand, Bogota, Canada, different parts of the globe. So as I say, greetings. I want to get us to slow down for a minute because it is Friday, right? I want to get us to slow down for a moment. So I'm going to invite you to, if you got that device in your hand, you're listening, you're driving, keep your eyes open on this one if you're driving. But I want to invite you to close your eyes for a moment and take a pause. Take a breath. What a blessing that we made it to Friday. That this group, that we, right, all 200 and still growing number of us made it to Friday. So get comfortable in your chair, in your recliner, on your couch, on the kitchen chair, in your office space. If you're standing and you're moving side to side like I am, settle in, feel your feet on the ground. Take a couple breaths. Yeah. Let's get into this space together. Let's imagine all of us together. And it may not be a space right now that can hold us all together, that we can all get in right now because we're all over. But let's imagine that space, right? It's in our minds, that space and it's still growing. The numbers getting into the several hundreds now, that we are together, leaning in to humanity, belonging, inclusion, showing up as we are into this space. So as we are connected, we're breathing, we're thankful, we got gratitude, we made it to Friday. We may have loved ones next to us. You're petting on the couch, you got one in your lap, right? Or you're looking across the kitchen, see someone waving at you. Say, I see you out there on that webinar. So let's be thankful and take a breath. We want to open this space also with a routine and ritual and a way to show some respect through acknowledging the land we're on. So me, I am here in California, East Bay, on Ohlone land. And we bring a routine and practice to land acknowledgement, really to respect those who've come before us and those that are here, still here, the shoulders that we stand with and stand on, First Nation folks, right? And that this land acknowledgement, although it's simple, it's a powerful way to show some respect. And it's a step toward correcting some stories and the eraser of certain things, of stolen land and colonialism still happening, right? And so as we name and pause and try and make more visible, it's a way to show some solidarity. It's a way to counter the doctrine of discovery, right? And colonialism. And so this acknowledgement by itself is a small gesture, but it's a powerful one in exercising the naming of indigenous folks and tribes that are inhabitants and currently living on the lands that we are all on ourselves. So as we acknowledge and I read you a statement, I want you to think about what you know about, who you know about that's still on the land that you're occupying, and who has been on the land that you're occupying. So as I read this statement, hold that in mind. So if you have your eyes closed still, that's fine. If you got a soft gaze, take this in for a moment. Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here or where you're at against their will. Some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hope of a better life. And some have lived on this land, on the land you're on, for more generations than can be counted. So truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. So me, Mark, I'm standing on the ancestral lands of Ohlone people. I'm gonna pause for you to think and to name and say the lands of the folks that you're on, if you know. And we pay respects to their elders, past and present. So as we take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together today, please join us in uncovering these truths by naming that in all public spaces. And so I'm gonna look at the chat and I already see it starting to get a little bit more action around some of the people and places and land that you're on. So I invite you to put that in there in the chat. And if you want to pull up your phone, if you have a phone that you want to pull up this site using this QR code, you could type in your address. You can grab this website and hit it and do it that way as well. Beautiful. And we know that land acknowledgement is just not enough. And so how do you make intentions to go beyond land acknowledgement? And so that the acknowledgement is a start. It's awareness. It's showing some respect and it's naming. And going beyond land acknowledgement, and here's a couple examples of ways in which people go beyond in their planning and in their intentions. So put your eyes on these for a minute and put in the chat anything you do in your context that's within the spirit of going beyond land acknowledgement. Put your eyes on these. And for ones of you, put anything in the chat, ways in which you go beyond land acknowledgement. Thank you for getting us going on the curriculum and the land tax, curriculum development, and teaching, truth and history. Yes. Look at y'all. And this is not a shame and guilt moment if you're not finding you're putting anything in the chat. This is that moment of like, what's mine to do? What's mine more to learn about and to consider what that means for me. So all good and all love as you're putting things in there, and you might be reading some things and say, I could do that. Well, I want to learn more about what that looks like. Beautiful. Awesome. Love this crew. Couple hundred of y'all. We in this space. We doing things. All right, y'all. I'm gonna keep it moving a little bit. I'm gonna bring this quote in by John Powell, scholar, historian, and everything. And as Susie, who you'll meet in a minute, refers to in her book as a host hero of belonging, John Powell says this: belonging means more than just being seen. Belonging entails having a meaningful voice and the opportunity to participate in the design of social and cultural structures. Belonging means having the right to contribute to and make demands on society and political institutions. I see a bridge between where we just were with honoring land, talking about folks, acknowledging folks, and knowing that folks are still here, and how do we partner and be in ways and notice who is still in our communities, right? And what does that belonging look like for Indigenous folks? And so I want to bring that quote in by bridging that. And now I want to take a moment to introduce some folks, right? Y'all came to hear some conversation and hear some talk about a beautiful, amazing book that's out, just dropped, right? So first, before I introduce the author and everything, Susie, and before I introduce Victor, a colleague, friend, and mentor of mine, I want to say Sarah and Sunny, right? Two of colleagues I have pleasure working with. You will see or hear or feel some of their experience of getting you here to this place. So they help with the design of the experience. They help you get into the space. You're gonna see them on the chat. You probably won't see them, but they're gonna be feeding me questions that are coming up to throw it back to Susie and to Victor. So it takes team. So y'all want to unmute, say at least hi so we can hear your voice, feel you?
Hi.
Hello.
So, hey, I got an honor now to continue on to say, let me introduce Susie Wise, right? Susie Wise, author of this insightful and practical book, Design for Belonging, right? Got mine. Susie's a designer, teacher. She's got experience in education, tech, social sectors, coaches leaders in innovative practices, equity design, storytelling for inclusion. Susie is a founder, co-director of the K-12 Lab Network at the Stanford D School and one of the co-creators of the Liberatory Design Framework. We're gonna link that later so you can get more into that. Susie's here, we'll talk about this beautiful book. Victor's here, Victor Carey, equally honored to introduce mentor friend of mine working with the National Equity Project. Victor has worked in education for over 40 years. That's 40, right? 40 years, starting as a high school teacher, right down the block from me, Richmond, California, Lonely Land. As senior director of the National Equity Project, sometimes we call it NEP, he led the development of organizations' innovative equity-centered coaching and leadership model and framework. He's also one of the co-creators of the Liberatory Design Framework. Victor has years of experience coaching, facilitating systems change initiatives across the country in a variety of contexts. So they're in the house. Let's give some snaps to them, right? Right, I hear you. I hear all hundreds of those snaps going and vibrating across the globe right now. All right. So we're going to take a moment to get their voices in. And anything more you want to add to your intro? And here's a prompt I'm offering, and we'll all three do this. Like, let's start with a place of a story of experience around belonging and how that experience shaped how you lead now, how it influences who you are now, how you lead in the work you do, right? So how about it, Susie?
Thank you. And first of all, I just want to say how grateful I am to be with both of you, Mark and Victor, and everyone from the NEP team. It's really an honor, and I'm so moved and grateful to be here. When I think about belonging, I often tell the story about the way I felt when my parents divorced. So that was not a feeling of belonging. And so just acknowledging how sometimes when we raise the question of belonging, we can get flooded with the feeling of when we didn't feel it. So as I've worked with that, I've also been noticing recently how much belonging I feel when I'm in the redwoods near me in Oakland. And I think of that in terms of my leadership and how I work with leaders in terms of both paying attention to young people or the young people that we carry within us that may have past harms that we're carrying. And then also how the beauty of the outdoors is healing for us and that we can use that in our leadership practices in more and more ways. So that's what I think about with that prompt.
Thank you, Susie. Victor Carey.
Greetings, everyone. What an honor and a pleasure to be here with you all today. Love me some Susie Wise and the amazing book that she's written. Such an inspiration. Can't wait to talk about it more. So when I thought about what I wanted to share about what's belonging to me, I actually have to do it today, I think, from the standpoint of being a lifelong educator. Did a lot of things for a lot of years, but came late mid-career to NEP. And it was the first time in my life that I felt like I had found a home and a place to belong. A place where there is principled struggle around creating a community made of a diverse group of folks up to something together. As allies, sometimes as co-conspirators, but the point is I could bring all of who I am into that space. And after all these years, I'm still excited to be here. As we reform and renew, because we have a new generation of folks in the organization now, we together grapple with what does it mean to belong? Given what we're up to together.
Beautiful. And for me, I was a little lost in college. I went there because it was like get a job, do something, or get out of the house. Just keeping it real. Francis Salinas, rest in peace. It was all love, and I'm glad I did go to college. But I kind of meandered around for a couple of years trying to figure out like what this was about, getting an education. I was like, I had a job, I was cool with that. Every class was boring, irrelevant till I got into Black studies and Black studies classes, which I'm like learning stuff that I never knew in my entire life. I found myself making the highest grades I ever made, and it wasn't about the grades, but I was just gobbling up every word that they were saying in class, my peers and classmates. I was reading all the books that were assigned versus like reading the beginning and the ending and looking for some like cheat sheet notes on it. So I was getting a sense of self, a level of excitement to learn and to read and to do something. And it was all asset based. And I felt like I could just show up in class and just riff and talk and build on stuff where I felt that I wasn't in sync with other places and spaces, meaning other classes that actually weren't seeing me or I was trying to follow rules. So how it shaped me is in my work when I'm with folks, I'm always looking for how are folks feeling that they can actually show up as they need to show up, how it's relevant to them, how they shine. And I would say probably more than anything, it's about the why does this matter to me, right? Why does this matter to me? And I got that when I felt I belonged in that particular in those classrooms in that department. And when I can kind of look out and after 15, 20 seconds of doing some work with some folks, if I'm not feeling like they're feeling it, it's about me, not creating that space or having some opportunity for them to see what's in it for them and how it connects to who they are. So I'll leave it at that. But my life changed and I liberated my mind back in the early 90s once I had some curriculum and a space to explore that. So I'm gonna take a breath on that. Invite Victor and Susie to take a breath on that. Because even just calling up those stories brings up emotions. And it's a good thing. We got to breathe on it, right? And lead from that place. Yeah. So check this out. Let's get into this book, y'all. Right? That's what we came here for, right? You last night you were like couldn't wait to wake up this morning and say, I'm on this webinar Friday afternoon, go hang out with Susie and Victor. All right. So Susie, why don't you get us started a little bit? Why this book, Designed for Belonging, right? Why this book? Kick us off here.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Thanks again. So this book, the why for me of this book was to help demystify how to start to take action to build more belonging and reduce othering. We have so much othering in our world, and we can get into some of the things that are driving us, when we get into more conversation. We have so much, and yet we also, as humans, know and need belonging. And so I wanted to try and bring forward the tools of design to help us move towards building more belonging. So if you share the next slide, Sarah, behind the scenes, thank you. The framework of the book is set up around feeling, seeing, and shaping belonging. And so I love that we started by talking about where and when and some stories around where we have felt belonging. One of the things I've noticed in the leaders that I've worked with and organizations that I've worked with is when we are starting to work on equity challenges, sometimes we end up moving in a kind of technical direction and get kind of bogged down. And when we remember that belonging is the felt, the feeling, the thing that we're trying to feel ourselves and to help those that we're working with to feel more often, it really opens up people in terms of being able to take up tools. So that's what I wanted to do with this book, is open up that feeling. It kicks off with the folks that I call the host heroes of belonging. Victor is in there as one of them, as you see. It's a big range of folks that come from a lot of different directions. So Camille Farrington is a scholar, as is Claude Steele. Carolyn Finney is an amazing storyteller and person who helps us think about representation. And Brene Brown, of course, is somebody who really popularized for many people helping us to think about what is the feeling of belonging and what's true belonging. I move on and talk about a whole bunch of other people from, contemporary folks like Laverne Cox and Boots Riley that are more in the cultural space, to local artists like Christine Wong Yap. If you go for the next one. And finally, the set of folks like Alita Hayes, John Powell, Bell Hooks. Sadly, this book was in production when she died. So she's the first of these host heroes who has passed. But these are folks that bring different frames around what belonging can be, so that we can think about what it feels like for us and for those we work with. The other set of tools that I like to think about are around seeing belonging and opening up what are the moments that we can concretely design. Sometimes we think about those early moments of the invitation or entering. Then it's also powerful to go further and think about what really is participation or contributing look like. We can also think about more subtle moments, like what is code switching, or how and when and where do we get to really flowing. Powerful additional moments that recall for me in some ways the John Powell quote that Mark kicked us off with, are thinking about what is dissent and what is repair, and what is it to know when we need to leave, and how do we come and go in community. These are concrete moments that if we open up and think about them explicitly and with intention, they can be opportunities for us to build belonging. So I wanted to offer that. And then the third set of frameworks in this book is around opening up our toolkit or our toolbox or the levers of design. So reminding ourselves that when we seek to build belonging in these moments, when we seek to repair, when we seek to offer new ways of entering, there are a wide range of tools that we can use that are already in our environment. So we can think about space and role and ritual. We can think about events and groupings. How do people come together? We can think really concretely about our communications mechanisms, even things like clothing and food. These are powerful things that we don't always think to design, but if we pay attention to them, if we engage them as tools to design our environments, our contexts, our organizations, they can become really powerful. And the last one there, schedules and rhythms. This is another powerful one to put us into real time. Finally, with those, that was obviously just a really like a quick hit of what these ideas are in the book. But I would invite you to think about, and we can populate the chat again, to think about a moment where you felt belonging or not. And what kind of a moment was it? What is it? One of those early kind of moments, like the invitation or the being welcome in entering a space? Or was it something more a part of community, like the way you were able to contribute, or even how you were able to raise a critical issue and offer dissent? What kind of a moment was it where you felt belonging? And what made it feel that way? Was there anything that was concretely created to support your feeling of belonging? We'd love to hear a few of those in the chat that we can think about together. We've got a 1-minute musical interlude here for you to think about and populate. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Amazing. What's in the chat? I love it.
And they're flowing so fast. It's a little hard to grasp.
Yeah. Wow. It's beautiful.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, being heard, being valued, gatherings, coaching, gratitude, being thanked.
It felt like my soul preceded me.
Genuine acceptance of who I am.
Being authentic during a tense meeting.
Nonverbal dialogue, free expression, free from judgment, music, connection. That's that flow, that dance.
Ooh. Listening dyads, like that one.
Yes. Beautiful. Caring for my elderly parents along with my siblings. That powerful kind of contribution of caring. being invited to offer reflections and opinions. Beautiful. Thank you all. Thank you so much. So that's the why of this book for me, is to offer the chance for us to reflect on the kind of moments that support us to belong and think about how we can concretely create more of those for more people in more places, especially for folks furthest from opportunity or who've been systematically othered. That's the why for me.
Similarly, if I could just say, my why is very similar. I think design for belonging is for me a direct response to othering in all the forms that it can take.
I want to take a moment to breathe on this chat for a minute. As I was taking it in, I don't know if you all got a waterfall of love and humanity. Let's take 3 deep breaths on that one. I can see us together. I was imagining the several hundred of us in a place. It wasn't a stadium. I don't know exactly where it is, but in my mind, I saw us walking and talking and pair sharing and huddling up. That chat was like starting to go into conversations, and I can hear and feel people. I hope you could too. All right, y'all. Let's get on with some more Q&A and some more questions. And so I want to pop this question to the two of you, and maybe even start with you, Victor, on this. Given our current realities, right, the polarity of our times, the ways in which so much has been historically designed for othering, right? And we got this pandemic wrapped up in all this. How do we design for belonging now? What are some things to be mindful and thinking of?
Well, I think I would start with me and how I am in this time of uncertainty and what I need for my own well-being and self-care, so that I can take the best of what I can contribute and working with others, make a response to, you mentioned that word polarity that we see in our world right now. So, you know, to me, belonging or designing for belonging is being able to manage those polarities in a healthy and generative way, and a loving way. And this moment we're in has revealed something many of us known for a long time, how divided we can be. And it's revealed all the cracks and fissures of the inequities that we see, particularly in our space of working in the education space. So design for belonging is a loving response to all of that. And then that can take shape when I look away from me to looking out, say, the window to what's out there and all the uncertainty of the moment. And I would say uncertainty moving in the future, that design for belonging gives us a way to see and engage and act anew, because it starts with us being in relationship with each other.
Yeah. I love that, Victor. It was you one time we were having a conversation, and I want to publicly give you credit, and I give you credit in the book too, for being the first person to hand me some of the writing of John Powell and make the suggestion that I might use it with some of the leaders that I was working with. And that was really cracked things open for me. But in addition to that, in a subsequent conversation we had, you reminded me that we refer to belonging as a sense of belonging, which is so important, I think, in that mirror work that you're describing. How do you start with yourself feeling what's happening. And then I think knowing that it's a feeling, that work to then inquire of others that you're in relationship around when and where are they feeling belonging, and when and where are they not, and bringing that, letting that sense of belonging, and it's sometimes opposite, lead the work, I think is really powerful.
Not only lead the work, but be able to sustain the work over time.
Yeah.
Because many of the things that we're grappling with, we don't have answers to, right? And so even slowing down, like the way Mark invited us to do, to notice and reflect on what's this current moment, and being present, is really hard. And so for me, without doing some of that work, it's not nice to do, it's a must do in order to sustain it over time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I feel like I hear your complexity lens coming in there too.
Yeah, I want to pull that out a little bit. Stay on that as we think of leadership and National Equity Project, and I reference you as being as influencing and supporting equity leadership framework in our organization. Say a little bit, Victor, about that intersection of equity leadership and designing for belonging,
Yeah.
and
So
bringing in complexity and equity, right? Yeah.
you're right. So for many years, our work as a school reform organization was around how to create beautiful, loving schools for children, particularly children furthest from opportunity. And we had a discourse around inequity. We had a discourse around what inequity looks like and feels like, and how it can get in the way of quality instruction in the classroom and the like. Really, really important. And we spent 10 incredible years creating small schools here in the Bay Area, and with remarkable people, leaders and community folks and so on. And we contributed to that. All necessary, but not sufficient. And one of the lessons coming out of the small schools movement was the fact that we did not have a shared understanding of what shapes and influences how we are together or not, right? And we use the language of systems change without having a powerful sense of what that actually entails. And so for me, the notion of complexity was when I took time to pause and reflect of those 10 years of doing small schools work, one of the big ahas for me was realizing I hadn't been making a discernment between things that we know how to do, complicated, and things we don't know how to do, complex. So when you're trying to create equitable schools, for example, that is squarely in the complex space, and it requires a whole nother orientation of how you be, how you do, in order to actually influence something different emerging. And so those two things are very connected. You could think of it as, what's the reality that we're in, whether we like it or not? What meaning do we make of that reality together so that we can take an action, which leads us directly to this notion of design, and particularly design for belonging.
Mm-hmm.
Want to get in on that, Susie? Anything that coming to mind as you laid out this framework around feeling, seeing, and shaping and thinking leadership? You want to build on, make any connections to?
Yeah, I was making a connection to something that Victor said and that got echoed in the chat about the continual invitation, that belonging is in fact a continual invitation. And that's the thing that we have to design for. And so I in that kind of flow of moments that I think about, they can be sequential, but they're meant to be continual, right? That we want to, and we can start in different places too. That may be that we're starting with repair because that's what the community needs and that's where we are. And so that I think is part of the sensing in and seeing the system and what's happening to uncover and help lift up in community what are the moments that need attending to.
Mhm.
So let me put this one out to you all. And you may have kind of already touched on it, but I want to go right to just at a fundamental level. Someone who just jumped on, saw the title, got the book or about to get the book, and taking in some of the framing, like someone coming in for the first time around this, first step, right, toward designing for belonging, or first step toward even trying to understand more around what this invitation is, right? Anyone want to take a cut at that question?
Well, I'll jump off of, just to make it concrete. One of the things that what Victor had been saying before was making me think about was just the simple tool of journey mapping in your context. What are the highs and lows of belonging and not belonging that you and the folks that you are working with, that you're endeavoring to collaborate with, build with, be in community with? How are they feeling, and being able to then speak to those maps of those ups and downs. It's a simple tool, but it can be very fruitful in terms of starting those conversations. And I pair that with also the tool of assumption storming. What are all the assumptions that we have around who gets to belong here, and why, and how, and what do we, that the both of those tools, I think, open up for us ways of working that can be really fruitful for in that spirit that you're talking about of kind of getting started.
Yeah, for me, getting started is when I learned to listen, I learned how to get started. And I mean doing the kind of listening that you're not typically trained to do, if you will. Listening to the stories of other folks and the experience that they have. And by the way, the experience they have is not up for debate. We say that a lot at NEP. But listening to those stories, and here is the part that sometimes feel challenging, and believe them. Yeah. Believe them. Yeah. So for me, that's where I start, listening to the stories, because the stories now speak to the current state of where an individual person might be and a group might be. And if you can grab a hold of that, that creates the opportunity to do some sense making together by sharing our stories.
Beautiful.
Yeah. We have a number of, I want to invite folks to submit some questions through the Q&A, and I see that's starting to light up, and we'll get some of those weaved in. And we do have a good number of folks who work in education spaces, and in particular in schools. So, what are some ways that you help folks get started, Susie, or things that point to, and again, this could be some things you want to re-emphasize that you said already, but maybe in particular when thinking about young people in schools, like ways to get started, or just some good learnings along the way as you've been doing this work with schools.
Yeah, thanks. I'll share a little bit of a story of a school district that invited me in just to share a little bit about these frameworks. This was very recently, 2 weeks ago, and we were looking at I had kind of shared some, given kind of a talk, setting up the ideas. And then we were just looking as a follow-up, there was an invitation to come and think about, is there some design work to do? And so we were just at that moment of having people speak to what the moments that they were noticing in their context and reflecting on what was happening. And predictably, there were some questions about an inquiry around some of the invitations. How might we improve the way we're inviting a wide range of parents into our group? But there was also somebody who said, I want to speak to an elephant that I think is in this room about the repair work that we need to do. And everyone was so grateful for that bravery, and obviously not sharing the details of what the stuff that had been happening in that community was. But I was pleased to see that just that kind of laying out of those moments allowed people to start to have a conversation and orient towards where the work was that they wanted to do in that school community as a way to help build bridges and much greater belonging in that. This was in the parent community, and with other of the educators from that school district.
Yeah, so funny listening to that story. Actually reminds me of a story pre formal design or liberatory design, something that I experienced with a colleague of mine who I want to shout out, Lisa Lasky, and work we were doing in the state of Washington some years ago.
She's here on the call.
Oh, good. And we were working with the early learning community in the state of Washington. And we were brought in to help facilitate a statewide meeting around the sort of the guidelines for early learning in that state, which had been created 5 years previous to this meeting. And so what seemed like a reasonably straight ahead meeting that you have all the time in education spaces, the truth of the matter is there were a number of folks who came to that meeting pretty upset about what had unfolded in the previous 5 years in the use of how you guide the learning and development of children, because it was supposed to be a guide that was inclusive of all the diversity that's in that state. Turns out, not so much from the standpoint of particularly the people of color. And so the meeting got quite heated. And it was a multi-day meeting. And just to make a long story short, the point is that the people of color in the room were not going to come back to the meeting. They felt disrespected and disenfranchised. And we had to find a way to keep them at the table. And now I'll cut to the chase. And the way we did that was to invite them back to the table, not to just review and update the sort of the guideline, but to reimagine and redesign the guideline, right? And do it in such a way that their voices, their stories could be heard and understood, to reimagine those guidelines. And it's an interesting story. It took a couple of years, but that we were able to make the shift. And believe me, I think we could have accelerated if we had the framing around design for belonging and liberatory design at our disposal at that time. We had some ways to do that work, but it was, I think we could have done it more efficiently in a short amount of time if we'd had some of the tools we're working with now.
Right, we're getting questions coming in. I'm gonna start giving you a couple more here from our wonderful folks. And you touched a little bit on this, but this notion around power dynamics. So can you speak about the relationship between power and belonging? Like, who gets to do the inviting in, right? And how can we shift that power dynamic? Look at the head nods
Yeah.
there. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Another great starting point is power mapping. Yeah. Victor, what were you going to say?
No, I again, just so many stories, because power, and when you're dealing with the issues of equity, the issues of power are always a key element of that. And how you move from power over to power with is a big part of the work. And what's nice about liberatory design, about design for belonging, it is about creating the space for a different distribution of how power is shared, because of the processes, because of the mindsets, because of the beautiful types of exercise you have in your book, Susie, that creates those conditions. Again, to be in relationship, to be seen, heard, and respected as you figure out some things. And I think one of the key features of the work is to go from designing for to designing with. And in that story about the state of Washington, the reason it took 2 years because we entered into a designing with process that it took a minute to create, to hold, to sustain, so we could get through to a convergence where everyone across all the stakeholders felt like they'd been seen, heard, and respected. And the good news is that experience showed me that it is possible. It is possible, but you have to be very deliberate about creating a thoughtful container to marshal the process along to get to the outcome.
Yeah. Well, and that raises for me too, just the power of co-design and how co-design builds belonging. So
Yes.
ensuring that any design team is inclusive of a wide range of folks with different kinds of expertise.
Yes.
Some that have design or process expertise, and then many folks that have the expertise of the lived experience of whatever the situation is.
Right. So I've been reflecting on the past. In our current moment, one of the things I would share is one of our big projects is it's called BELL, Building Equitable Learning Environments, and it's a network of 17 school districts around the country. And one of the key features of that work is creating what we call circle teams, and the circle teams are comprised of students, teachers, site administrators, central office folks, sometimes community folks, but the point is it's a circle team, and the key feature is working on how do you co-design for the changes you want to see in your context, and share power, be able to operate from your spheres of influence in deep relationship to drive to a shared intention or shared outcome. So so the design for belonging, using liberatory design is a powerful vehicle, and that's what we're doing, frankly, in terms of developing circle teams, supporting the development of circle teams and what they're doing in their systems.
Susie, couple folks were intrigued by you referred to journey mapping and power mapping. Located in the book, point folks to a little bit more where can connect around notions of that. Now,
yeah, in the book, in particular, journey mapping is there, and the kind of the version of there isn't an explicit power map there. But power does come up at different points. And I think you can really use the assumption storming tool around power too, right? So that's a tool that is in the book that you could use around power. And they're simple tools. They're not complicated, but hopefully they allow for the complexity of what you're working in to start to emerge when you enable everyone that is doing the work to map where they are in terms of those highs and lows of belonging, and share the stories of where belonging and othering are occurring.
Yeah. What I appreciate about Susie's book is she's actually made available a simplified way to access some fairly intense social complexity, right? So you don't have to know all the lingo, you don't have to know sort of all the theory, all of that stuff. You can just pick it up, and if you have some will and some intention to be in relationship and to create bridging stories and not breaking stories, this book can really be helpful, particularly if you're just getting started.
Yeah.
Here's a little offering for you. Love this question. Let me lead in with designing with instead of designing for is so key for a sense of belonging, right? That being said, how to advocate for co-design given the urgency, budget constraints, right, that are often embedded in some of the design projects, and so balancing that urgency with the authentic with in partnership, co-design.
Ooh,
Yeah.
good.
Mm.
You want to start on that one, Susie?
Well, one thing that I'll say is, you know, there's lots of work to do to dislodge a kind of white supremacist urgency agendas. So that's like one piece of work to do. And even in those contexts, width is going to get you that solutions that are closer to what's needed anyway. That's been my experience, particularly if you're thinking about belonging, that there is no, that the kind of the othering move of not actually designing with isn't going to get you where you need to go. We have that history all over us right now. And so the power of taking the time to get into relationship, to address the power in the room, to see the system so you can be in relationship, to be designing with, I think might get you there faster anyway. It's certainly going to get you to the real thing.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's incorrect to think by taking the time to notice and reflect with each other about the current state, meaning, you know, what's happening in this moment, and given what's happening in this moment, what might be possible. You can move then to take an action, right? And so you don't have to have an elaborate strategic plan. You don't have to create the blueprint map in order to get started, right? And that's the beauty about design. Design is about trying some stuff, right? So if you're in relationship and there's something you want to grapple with, you ask a few essential questions about, given the situation, what might we try? And given what we're trying, how do we know we're making progress on that? And then what would success looks like? And what if it didn't work, what will we do next? So you can do that tomorrow with some folks. So you said, Susie, to demystify this is more about being in relationship with some other folks and then going to do some stuff, right? And these things can help elicit that and bring it forward. But at the end of the day, it's about being in a relationship, moving at the speed of trust, and inside of that, anything might be possible.
All right, y'all. Well, I want to apologize for not being able to get to all the questions in the Q&A, but I see you, those that raised a couple questions in there. I want to go into a closing question for the two of you, Victor and Susie. Ron, anything else you want to share about what becomes possible, right? What becomes possible when designing for belonging, right? Anything else you want to add that comes to mind around what might be possible?
So what I would say, you know, and again, this is very much connected to our work at NEP. This is the designing for belonging is a precondition for problem solving and decision making. So you can't actually skip over it, you can try. And there's been lots and lots of reforms that try to make it just a technical problem. But it is, if you want to scale deep, if you want to actually have something that's durable and adaptive to changing conditions, which will be forever, then designing for belonging is an essential feature of being able to problem solve, make decisions appropriate to the situation. And so for me, that gives me hope around actually influencing and catalyzing systems change and creating more equitable systems, more resilient systems, more liberatory systems. So that would be the thing I would want to offer as a parting consideration.
Thank you. Thanks for the question, and thanks again for everyone for being here. I want to get to deeper, wider, more profound efforts at repair and reparations. And I think, I mean, kind of echoing part of what you're saying, Victor, that design for belonging is going to be a precondition for that, or a really important component of that. so that I just want to lift up kind of that notion of using design for belonging to get us to repair and reparations.
Beautiful.
So we're gonna do some virtual snaps wherever you're sitting and standing, if you're able to snap or tap, all right, to send something to Victor and to Susie. I feel a chat waterfall coming on. Oh, before the thank you, Sarah, I feel a chat waterfall coming on, and then we'll put that back in there, Sonny. I'm calling a chat waterfall, and if you haven't done it before, we're gonna put out to the universe through our chat an intention, right? This book, which you either have it now or you're about to get it tonight, very practical. And you heard a lot of stuff in the chat and from our amazing leaders here that doesn't, none of that is like, you have to be thinking, I got to get a team, right? There's things that you got to meet, build. You could do some stuff tonight and tomorrow that's actually around belonging and inclusion, right? So I'm going to invite you to queue up something in the chat. So I'm going to ask you to write something, but don't press enter yet. We're going to do a chat waterfall. We're going to release it at the same time. If you feel me, right? You're going to chat an intention around something, but don't hit return yet. I see the chat moving. I see some appreciation. I see you. Love for that. We're going to do a chat waterfall. Queue up something in the chat. Intention you go have going forward around belonging. Might even start tonight or tomorrow. You want to get more intentional about how you listen, how you make space for feeling, how you talk, how you want to show up. Take 15 seconds to write something. Don't worry about capitalization and periods and exclamations and emojis. I'll tell you when to release it. Right? It's going to be a waterfall.
You should try playing Simon Says with this guy. All I got to say.
That's it. Coming soon to a theater near you. All right, write a little intention. You got something. It's coming out of you. I feel it. We still together for another minute. Yep. Don't release it yet. Right? An intention. Something around belonging, right? It's gonna start tonight, tomorrow. We're gonna go a little bit further, a little deeper, expand a little bit, take some risks, try some stuff, notice and reflect. All right, here we go. Hit that enter button, that return button. Let it go. Right? Beautiful, awesome people. I see you. Look at you. If I could slow it down, there it is. Kindness and empathy. I could see and pull out a few. Ooh, resist the pressure to move without tending to belonging. Right? Empowering students and co-designing with BIPOC folks outside, going beyond normal. Like, okay, we got to stop here. Out to the universe. We see you. Let's put that thank you slide up, Sarah, Sunny. Some snaps to our colleagues, Sarah, Sunny, fielding questions, making this space for y'all. We thank you. Hey, good people, you are enough, right? You are enough to make progress on those things that matter to you. And do it as you. Get the book, stay in the struggle. We'll see you on the next go round.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.